Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Maple Grosh and Syrup. I am Groshin Krashevsky. Have the great pleasure of bringing on to the channel today Zane Pulver for an episode entitled "A Millennial." Myself interviews someone from Gen Z. Zane, we often hear about the Gen Z generation is the forefront, period in a general sense, with the "okay boomer" meme, hopes and fears about the future, often a kind of very negative outlook on the future. I have found Zane to be one of the most positive, inspirational people. That's why I wanted to interview him and talk to him. That I think we too often see people from Gen Z giving a kind of negative, perhaps very justified, but outlook about the future. Zane, I think, is someone who's very, very impressive and has a lot going for him and a lot we can perhaps learn from his experience. He is 26 years old, a Boise State graduate, spent 2 years working in medicine before deciding to return to school to finish prerequisite courses before entering medical school. He's a husband and a father. He's a lifter, does a lot of DIY projects, an outdoorsman, practicing Catholic. A lot of different facets to this guy. So, Zane, thank you for coming on. Can you tell us what you're doing right now? If you wanted to share with the audience anything you think is of value, important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on. Currently, I am on the study grind. I'm working on organic chemistry, a 7 week course. It's actually a 16-week full course in 7 weeks. So I've just been grinding about 6 to 8 hours a day just on chemistry. So a lot of fun with that. Just working on learning how to be a new parent. I have a 4-month-old daughter named Josephine. Trying to be a good husband to my wife as we kind of adjust to the 4 month sleep regression. Just enjoying time with my puppy. He just turned one. His name's Walter. And then just trying to enjoy the outdoors and our family time. As you can tell, it's beautiful outside. So we just try to go on hikes and enjoy everything that we have going on.
If you could tell us, that sounds wonderful. Congratulations. Yeah, a lot going on in your life for sure. What does this look like? You talked about in that introduction, or I, in the introduction that I did of you, talked about the 2 years getting ready for medical school. What does medical school look like for you? Because I know, first of all, very little about it, just kind of from an outsider perspective. But there's this idea with like DO, MD, etc. People want to go into you know, um, people want to become cardiologists, foot and ankle specialists, family medicine. Can you tell us, like, what do you envision the full path being for you? And if you could give us the whole story of kind of where you're now, where you're prepping, and what's the end goal with medicine for you?
For sure. So currently, I'm actually in the process of submitting some of my first applications to medical school. I just submitted my first one this last Thursday. So that's super exciting, definitely stressful. But I'm applying to a good mix of medical schools. So I have a few MD schools and more DO schools, mostly because of location. So I'm in the Northwest. I'd love to stay in this area. And so a lot of the schools that I'm applying to are either close to home or at least semi close to home. Definitely in the West. I'm not doing anything east of the Mississippi at this point, except for maybe one school in Florida. And the reason for that, other than just the location factor, is that DOs they get the same education as an MD. But what I think is nice is the osteopathic philosophy, which is treating the whole patient. And obviously, MDs, not to disparage them at all, they also do look at the whole patient. But I think the way that the DO philosophy is taught can be really beneficial for patient care. So looking at the mind, the body, and the spirit of the patient. And I feel like that holistic view is super important to taking care of someone, especially at a primary care level, which I'm definitely leaning more towards as I get closer to hopefully being accepted into medical school this year and then going through school and then into residency. Um, I leaned towards family medicine for quite a while, but I found myself more attracted to maybe internal medicine, psychiatry, even OBGYN. Um, but I'm just trying to kind of keep my options open at this point, see where the rotations take me. And so we'll kind of go based off of that.
Well, that sounds fascinating. What do you think? Maybe you're kind of working this out for yourself too at this stage, but where do you think the line is, or the general kind of thrust of society is, uh, between, on the one hand, this kind of stereotypical, pills for everything, right? No matter what, just we'll write a prescription for you. I have family who are doctors, and they will say that in the profession writ large, you often run into this frustration, right, of kind of like the society as a whole having this consumerist mindset, like, I can just get a pill, get a prescription for X, Y, or Z. I'm sure, again, you tell me, I'm sure there's times when that is necessary, but where is the line, or what is the percentage between, like, actually a lot of it is preventative, a lot of it is just taking care of yourself, a proper diet? How does all that work out? What's your philosophy on that?
Good question. And I think it's kind of varied. It definitely varies a lot between person to person and patient to patient, and even the different age ranges that we're looking at when it comes to care. So, a lot of the stuff, if you can get them young with preventative medicine, I think that a lot of the chronic disease epidemics that we're seeing, like obesity, depression, anxiety, a lot of the things that millennials and Gen Z are facing, can be prevented, if not, uh, I don't want to say cured, but we can prevent those chronic issues from popping up later in life through good diet, exercise, like you mentioned. Um, Even just mindfulness techniques and having a full life. And so, like I was mentioning with the DO philosophy of mind, body, spirit, whether you're religious or find another way to take care of your spirit, so to speak. I feel like that is oftentimes underlooked in our society, and I feel like I've seen a shift, especially in a lot of Gen Z, towards realizing how important that is and seeing all the good that comes from that aspect of, I guess, cultivating that aspect of our humanity. And they've also seen the bad that comes when we don't cultivate that. Um, and so
Yeah.
going off of that, like I totally agree. I think there are certain conditions and certain reasons why we may need, a pill or an injection to fix an issue that can't be treated with just prevention. Like for myself, I do have an autoimmune disorder that I developed when I was about 17. And so I do take some medications for that because at this point, there's not much I can do, I guess, so to say, naturally to, I guess, prevent it because I already have it, but also reduce pain and inflammation. So I do use some prescription medications and I found that they've helped me a lot. But I also look forward to the future with a lot of hope for all of the new technologies and new medications that are coming out that are going to have way better risk profiles and be way more specific. I think that's what I'm mostly looking forward to in medicine is how tailored we're going to be able to make things to people's specific symptoms, specific needs, genetic diversity. And so I think it's fascinating and I think it's an amazing time to be alive despite all the craziness going on in the world. There's so much to look forward to and so many cool things that we can work with.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for choosing this path. It seems like for a long time now it's been a stereotype, but a true one, where people are asked, "What do you want to do in life?" And the most popular answer now is, influencer, of course, which is extremely hypocritical of me if I'm going to criticize this in the middle of interview on a YouTube channel, a social media platform. But that idea of, like, influencer, entrepreneur, start my own business, and this kind of like hyper individualism that I think is endemic to our society, has been for a long time. It's fun to see someone like you again. I think in so many ways you break a lot of the stereotypes of young people today, of going into this classic profession that honestly does. I mean, let's be honest, right? There's a lot of professions and majors and stuff that do not benefit people. Being a medical doctor is the dictionary definition of helping people. So, thank you for that. I want to get into some of your earlier story and just kind of go through your biography in general. But I want to ask you a question, because you talked about mindfulness, kind of an awareness of spirituality, for sure. Whether it's people talking about, oh, everyone in Gen Z is becoming Catholic, or Gen Z in general is going back to church. Maybe it's different Protestant denominations, or like you said in general, a very general awareness of the spiritual reality. We're not talking about circa 1998. Everyone is just kind of like, atheist, without even calling it that. We're just all kind of like living for a, consumerist culture. What do you think is behind that? Why is that going on? Why do people are happy about it and mad about it? Why does Gen Z have this like stereotype of they're becoming much more religious, much more spiritual? Why?
It's a good question, and I think I kind of touched on it where I was talking about the seeing the consequences of not having religion and spirituality in our world. I think that that has probably played the biggest part in it. Um, you mentioned there's a lot of obviously there's the Zoomers, there's the Boomers, and then some people call Zoomers Doomers also.
Yeah.
And that's just that doom mindset. And I think that doom mindset came about because of all the craziness going on in the world right now. You know, all the division, all the fights happening between the two sides, and just this warfare that's happening, whether you want to call it spiritual warfare or just, the warfare between the left and the right and the center. Um, I feel like things have become so divided that people feel that there is a need for something that unites us all and is greater than us all. As humans, we're so flawed, and I think for a long time we tried to play God, and we just turned away from things that we couldn't explain and said, "Oh, we'll be able to explain them eventually." And I think as time has gone on and as our technology's gotten better and as we've experienced more disconnection from technology even, we've found this deep yearning in the human soul and we've almost rediscovered it to for a force that brings us all together. And ultimately, I think a lot of people have seen in the traditional religions, whether it be Orthodoxy, Catholicism, or even some of the Protestant sects of Christianity, they found that thing that does connect them together. And I know for me, I was a cradle Catholic, but I turned away from the church for a number of years, all throughout high school, going through most of college. And it wasn't until my senior year of college that I decided to fully commit to the Catholic Church and go back to church full time, get confirmed. And so I feel like I kind of joined the church at the same time that we've seen this huge boom in the Gen Z culture shifting towards religion. And I know that, in my confirmation class, it was like 30 or so kids that were um, from ages probably 18 to like 28 that were all either joining the church for the first time or coming back. Um, and I think that we all had relatively similar reasons for wanting to come back. That connection, the community, and just the being a part of something bigger than yourself that transcends all of humanity and what we go about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So let's dive into that. Because again, anyone who's just joining now or missed the earlier point, etc., whatever. Zane was born in the year 2000. This is amazing. There's the funniest conspiracy the funniest conspiracy theory of all time, I think, is the phantom Middle Ages. Have you ever heard of this or no?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so I find it hilarious. Uh, that basically between the year 614 AD and 911 AD, those 297 years do not exist. They were invented by a kind of like triumvirate of conspirators, Otto, the Holy Roman Emperor, etc., whoever, the Pope Sylvester, I think, of that time, because all of them wanted to be alive during the millennium, during the year 1000. So they just, and this German historian proposed this in 1991 uh, that it's serious because we have this dearth and paucity of uh, data from that time. It's been completely debunked. We can look at kind of like astronomy and many different examples. That I don't want to get far afield now and go down a whole rabbit hole. But the point I'm making is, as in this funny conspiracy, people have always been fascinated by then the year 1000, the year 2000 was a huge deal. I remember I was turning 13 then. I'm a smack in the middle millennial. I'm a perfect millennial in terms of like my generation begins in 1981 and ends in 1994. I was born in 87. I turned 13, like coming of age in the year 2000, the year that you were born. And so Zane was born in this year, this like most special year, Y2K, all of that. And I think we can understand enough of how like anyone at that time goes through either a crisis of faith or becomes lukewarm or kind of falls away. But can you take us to about that time, like you said, when you're in school, and you're at Boise State at this time? You're at BSU the whole time undergrad?
Not the whole time in undergrad. I was
Okay.
down in Tampa, Florida for my first 3 semesters of school.
So
So
wait, so
University of Tampa.
Tell us about that. Let's go to Tampa. Let's like dive in there. What's like 2018, 17? What year is this?
2019, fall of
Right.
2019 is when I went down there.
So tell us, yeah, take us to Tampa. Where are you at that point as Zane Pulver, the guy who's now getting ready to go be a medical doctor? You know, almost 10 years later. What is Zane Pulver like down in Tampa those 3 semesters?
Yeah, good question. Across those 3 semesters, it actually varied a lot. So when I graduated high school, I essentially wanted to get as far away from home as possible. So I moved like 2,000 miles away. And I think I just wanted to go out on my own and live as an adult, experience the world, experience a new place. And so I left probably August of 2019, arrived down in Tampa, and made some really great friends when I was down there. I rushed a fraternity, did the whole like college experience thing. And it was a super fun time. I definitely was not practicing my faith at all. Um, Making some bad decisions, some questionable decisions. Luckily, didn't get in any big trouble. Didn't have any big issues, but I did not focus on school at all. That's actually a big reason why I left Tampa. Um, was I found myself just not being committed to school, and I had been pretty much a straight A student my whole life, going through elementary, middle, high school, and then I like failed out of a class my freshman year of college, dropped another class, ended up probably finishing the semester with like 8 credits and a bunch of B's and C's, which I was like, this has never happened before. I was really cultivating my social life, but I was not cultivating any other part of my life other than socializing and having fun. Um, and so that was my freshman, I guess, fall semester of 2019 in Tampa. And then, went home for winter break, ended up going back to Tampa in January for my spring semester. And same thing for the first about probably about 2 months, first 2 months of my second semester of college. And then uh, came home for spring break to see my family. I figured I wasn't going to come home for another spring break. I'd be out, with my friends going on different trips and stuff. So I came home, was visiting, and the day before I was supposed to fly back to Tampa, COVID hit. And so my mom says, "You're not flying back to Tampa. You're staying at home. They're going to change everything to online anyway." And what do you know? I lived in my high school bedroom in the basement for the next, I guess, like 6 months, and did online classes, finished out the semester. Um, and at the same time, I had so much time on my hands, just being at home, doing online class. They didn't really know what was going on with online classes at that time. It had just started. Um, so I had a ton of time on my hands. I ended up looking really deeply into health and, like I mentioned earlier, my autoimmune disease, and how movement and exercise can positively impact that. And so I became really committed to losing my little beer gut that I had developed down in Tampa and getting in good shape. And so I had like
That sounds
TRX
like
bands and rings.
that that sounds like Tampa Beer Gut sounds like a NASCAR slash like country song, some kind of theme. Like you can make a reality show out of that.
It's that or it's a punk band.
Yeah, or that. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Um, but anyway, yeah, so I started getting in shape in my parents' basement, doing push-ups, sit-ups, got some like TRX bands and was doing shoulder exercises and everything. And I got super into exercising and eating clean, meal prepping, tracking calories. Um, Ended up losing the whole beer gut, getting some abs and everything. And I felt great. Worked over the summer a little bit and then went back to Tampa in the fall. Uh, and by the time I made it back to Tampa for my third and final semester there, I was completely over the party scene, wasn't drinking anymore. All I was doing pretty much was working out. I lived in a house with some buddies, and it was not one of our party houses, but we would throw little get togethers there throughout the week. And I would find myself not attending those. I would drive my car down to the gym that I had a membership at, and I would go from like 10 p.m. to midnight or midnight to 2 a.m. It was a 24-hour gym. And I'd just go work out for 2.5 hours, come home, and then I'd make my chicken and rice or chicken and potato bowl while there was people drinking all around and being drunk. There's drunk girls like saying, "Oh, that chicken smells so good. Can I have some?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. I need to get my calories." So
There was
it
this,
was big switch.
I'll never forget. I'll never forget. I was at the gym like a long time ago, maybe 12 or 13 years ago, 15 years ago. But I'll never forget chicken and rice because there was these two guys, and they were both football players for the University of Utah, and they were like working out in the gym in the off season, and both of them were comparing abs. They were just like standing there shamelessly with their shirts pulled up, and who's more jacked. And the one guy was like, "Dude," he's like, "How'd you get so chiseled?" And he says verbatim, he's like, "Chicken and rice, bro, chicken and rice."
It works. It does.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so that was probably where the big shift in my life happened was around I guess COVID going into that fall semester of my sophomore year. Yeah, so first semester of sophomore year. Um, and it was an interesting time. I definitely was more disconnected from the social life just because I was more so focused on myself, focused a little bit more on school, got some grades up, still wasn't doing fantastic. Um, and then at the same time, my father, he had gotten really sick my senior year of high school, actually, with ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. Um, and around the same time, he had given me some phone calls, and I could barely understand what he was saying. And I really felt drawn home at that point, not only just for being homesick and missing, the West, missing my family, but also just feeling like I needed to be close to my dad in case and when something was going to happen, just so that I could be there for him and be a good son. And so I ended up transferring my, I guess, end of my fall semester. So December of 2020, I drove back all the way from Florida back west, like 2,400 miles or something over 3 days with one of my friends. Um, Moved back into my parents' house for about a month or two before I found my own place to rent and transferred to Boise State.
so you show up at BSU, and what is the process like from that point, from having transferred in, like you said, with the personal family issues with your father, etc. And yeah, it seems. I mean, that's obvious. That makes perfect sense. It's perfectly understandable. The combination of everything going on with the pandemic and with your father's health. What is the process from like you showing up at BSU? It's a double question for you, and the reason it's a double question is I'm going to ask you in the first part about just like your journey back to your faith, but Gen Z people, Gen Z men, right? The whole manosphere, blah blah blah. The thing that's often most kind of like either in this kind of like doom and gloom or kind of black pilled attitude is the relationship between men and women, right? And it's this kind of like men should do their separate thing, or men and women are meant to be kind of antagonistic. This is obviously not at all kind of a Christian view, right? As complementary parts and all that. The two questions I have for you are kind of one and the same, because again, I think one of the things that's very inspirational about you is that as you get ready to go off to medical school, you are a husband, a father, you have all the kind of like classic components of a life together. How, after you get back to BSU, do you come back to your faith, number one? And number two, how do you meet your wife? What's her deal? What's your deal as a couple? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So coming back to BSU, my first, I want to say, let's see, 2021, 2022, 2023. So about the first 3 years that I was at BSU, I ended up losing a lot of credits when I transferred. So I ended up having to do close to 4 years, even though I had already done quite a bit of school in Tampa at BSU. So I want to say my first 2.5 to 3 years being back in Idaho, uh, I really just wasn't focused on anything other than exercising, cultivating a few friendships that I had from my childhood, from high school, and a few new friendships I made, and just hanging out in the outdoors. I hunted a lot, I fished a lot, um, and I just worked out all the time. And so that was my main focus other than school. I started doing much better in school. I switched to a business degree at the time, and that's what I graduated with. And so focused on school, workouts, and friends, and that was about it. I didn't really have a huge interest in cultivating a relationship with a woman for the majority of that time. Uh, Towards the end of that period, I want to say around 2022, maybe midway through the year, I ended up, I was with my good friend Brock, um, and we were driving, I think back from a fishing hole, and we started to get to talking. It was around Easter time, and he was telling me he'd grown up in a non-denominational sort of church, never been like officially baptized, but he considered himself a Christian. And so we kind of got to talking about the difference between non-denominational and Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and I feel like at that time things were kind of growing with the whole religious movement in general. Um, and so we kind of went back and forth. He knew nothing about Catholicism, and I only knew what I knew from being a cradle Catholic and going to Catholic high school. Um, and I will say I was not very committed to my studies of theology in high school, so I didn't know a whole lot. Um, but we ended up going back and forth, and I was like, no, I think it's this way. This is what I was taught. Um, and so we ended up deciding to go to a Greek Orthodox church for a divine liturgy, because we both thought it looked so beautiful. Um, and so we went to that. It was a beautiful experience, very amazing people. Um, Gorgeous liturgy, and we really enjoyed ourselves. But there were a few things for me that, as a Catholic, as a cradle Catholic, I felt a little weird about, like dropping the filioque and that sort of thing. And so I was like, I think that we should go to a Catholic mass. I haven't been in 4 years, so we should probably go. Like, we should check it out. You should see what you think. And so we went to Bronco Catholic, the church on Boise State's campus, and Father Nathan Dale, he's the priest there. He was one of the priests in my wedding who's helped us celebrate our marriage. And it was incredible. It was leading up to Easter, tons of smells and bells. It was beautiful. Like, my friend was coughing and sneezing the whole time, but he loved it. I loved it. And I was like, man, I feel like I need to come back to the Catholic Church. I need to look into what I've been missing out on all these years. Um, so I started watching YouTube, listening to podcasts, uh, reading books, reading the Bible, and everything that I did just drew me closer and closer to the church. And then I ended up, signing up for confirmation classes, some Bible studies, that sort of thing. Um, and around the same time, I was like, maybe the reason I've had this lack of interest in getting a girlfriend or getting a fiance, is that God is trying to call me to be a priest. And so for a short period, I was like fairly convinced that I was going to be a priest. I was on a few dating apps. I was trying to meet people out and about while I lived near campus, and just kept hitting dead ends. And so I was like, maybe God's really just calling me to be a priest. And I had deleted all of the dating apps except for Bumble. And this is the story of how me and my wife met. I had deleted all the dating apps except for Bumble. I'd been on them for months and months and months. Met and gone on dates with quite a few people, and none of them panned out at all. Um, and I was going to delete my last app and then go talk to Father Nathan about like the process of becoming a priest. And uh, Isabel, my wife, at the same time, had never been on a dating app, and her friend convinced her that she needs to get on a dating app because she really wants a husband and really wants to get married and have kids. So she has to do something. She's not meeting anyone anyway else. So her first day on the dating app and what was supposed to be my last day on the dating app, we ended up connecting um, via recognizing each other from high school. We knew each other's names, but we never met in high school. She was a year above me. We're 3 days apart in age. I'm actually 3 days older, but she was a year above me in school. Never met a single time. We knew all these people in common. Had heard each other's names, but we recognized each other's pictures from St. Paul's, the Catholic Center at BSU, and got to chatting. Kind of casual conversation. Next weekend, we met after mass. Asked her on a date, got her number. We went to coffee, and within the first, I think, 2 dates, I had told my mom, I was like, yeah, I'm seeing this girl Isabel. I think I'm gonna marry her. And what do you know? We're what, I guess like 2.5 years later, we're married, have a baby. So it happened quick, but it was the most. It's always cheesy when people say, "When you know, you know." Um, but for us, I feel like it was definitely that way. Where I met her. within 8 hours of us actually having conversations face to face, I was like, I want this woman to be my wife and the mother of my children.
That's incredible. And what's cool is too that again, like I keep the theme of what I thought this interview would be with you has panned out to be perfectly true. Of you kind of breaking the typical stereotypes. Gen Z, when they talk about dating apps and that kind of thing, it's always extraordinarily negative, right? It's always just like, oh, there's nothing good. It's all bad. The culture's bad. And everything's bad. And like again, that kind of like black pilling negative attitude. And here it's like, of course, and thank God you guys had to do all this stuff in real life, and there had to be chemistry on the date, and the rest is history. But because of this dating app, the last day and the first day, right? It kind of, yeah. So maybe it's one of those things too that it's like not everything about society now, like you said, you mentioned earlier, it's the best time to be alive because of all the problems to solve, but also maybe some of the technological stuff too. They can be used for good too. As there's an example here. I think we
Absolutely.
have yeah, I think we have time for like three more things. I want to ask you three more things. I mean, I could talk to you for 9 hours, but we don't have the time for that. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
have to have you back again later for a later interview, like a part two. But the final kind of three things I want to ask you. I'll tell you the latter two in a second. But the third to last is kind of we talked about you already. Going off to do medical school. You're a husband and a father. Return to the faith. Tell us really quickly. If I'm like a Gen Z person, I'm like I don't want to work out. Working out is dumb. Tell me why I should work out, but it can't just be about my health, right? It can't just be it's good for
Hmm.
me. Like, can you tell me like what are your numbers? What's your deadlift max? What can you bench? Imagine if I'm like a Gen Z guy and I'm like I'm inspired by that. Like, are you ripped? Like, are you a monster in the weight room? Like, what could you tell me about that?
Yeah. Let's see. Let me address the first part first. So I would say, other than it's good for you, at least for men, I would say it's a really positive way to get out pent up energy and maybe frustration that you have in your life, whatever that may be from. Um, like for me personally, if I find myself, I have a hard day and I go, actually, you can see my little shed back there. That's my little home gym. I have a squat rack in there. I'll go there. I blast some music, some kind of heavy music, Metallica, something like that, and I'll do heavy squats until I am not thinking about whatever made me mad anymore, and I feel much better after. I think it's a really good, uh, positive coping mechanism because not only is it good for you, but it's also a harmless way to get out some of that aggressive energy or frustrated energy that you might have. Um, and so I find it really fantastic for that. So I definitely recommend it for that reason. And I think it can kind of apply the same way to women. Obviously, very different in the way that they express their emotions, that sort of thing. But I think it can be really positive for almost like a sense of sweat therapy, if you want to call it that. Um, and then going on to part two, my numbers. I don't currently have enough weights to max out my deadlift, but I would say I'm probably somewhere around like 425 for deadlift, straight bar, and then my squat currently is sitting around 325. Um, and I do like full Olympic squats. That's kind of my thing. So do them with my Olympic weightlifting shoes and do slow pause squats, that sort of thing. And then my bench, I don't do a flat bench too often. I do more slight incline, and I did that today. I think I did 205 for six for a couple sets, so I'm not sure my max on that. And then I do. This is not a traditional like SBD lift, but I do lots of weighted pull-ups. Big fan of those, and I'm doing those right now with like 75 pounds for 2 reps.
That's excellent. I mean, incredible numbers. But the thing you said there, I think, is something that everyone wants to work towards or aspire to. That I don't have enough weight to max out. I don't know. There's one one of uh, one of my favorite movies by M. Night Shyamalan is Unbreakable, and the Bruce Willis character. To make a long story short, and I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but it's about like a real life superhero, a guy who's literally unbreakable. And at one point, he starts discovering his strength, and he can't max out on his bench because he goes full Zane Pulver. He doesn't have enough weight. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. He doesn't know what his max is. Last two things. Last two things I want to ask you. Last two things. Um, is okay. So like, I love the first question's about the second to last question. The first, these last two questions about Gen Z slang. Uh, as a millennial, I love, love, love cooked. I love that. We are so cooked, bro. I love that slang. But I hate the slang term mid. Oh, this party's mid. This I hate that. That's the worst. There's good and bad. There's good and bad. I mean, I'm sure like the 1970s, like groovy, right? It's terrible,
Mhm.
But oh, he's a cool cat, or this person, she's swell in the 50s. I like cooked. I hate mid, and then I could go and list like a pro and con. Can you tell us, as an authority on Gen Z, what is some of the best Gen Z slang that you approve of, and what do you despise?
Man, that's tough. I feel like I'm kind of disconnected from a lot of the Gen Z slang. Um, because I don't have, Instagram or like Snapchat or any of the big like Gen Z apps. Really, I'm on X sometimes and
Yeah,
I'll go on Facebook for the weather. I'm kind of like an old guy. Um, I do love cooked. I will say that. Um, I feel like I end up saying dead ass a lot. Which I find kind of funny. It's like it's really funny. um, I don't really like mid. I agree with you on that. I'm trying to think. My wife will get mad at me when I say certain Gen Z slang, and it's kind of funny. But I try to
What
take it out
about
of my
what's the
vocabulary.
deal? What's the deal? What's the deal with aura? Like, what's up with
Aura,
that? Yeah, what's up
aura.
with that?
I think aura, like definition wise, is just like the vibe you put off. So like if you have aura, like people are attracted to you. Um, just in general, like if you're like a really social person who's attractive and everybody at the party wants to come up and talk to you, I think it's like you have aura. I might be completely off base with that.
I
Um,
think yeah, it's like aura. Or yeah, aura's okay. I hate Riz. Like, just say charisma. Charisma is a beautiful
I
word.
I disagree on that one. I find
You like
Riz
Riz?
really funny. I feel
Riz?
like a lot of the Gen Z slang is kind of ironic on purpose. Um, although I don't know if everybody who says it means it in that way.
Right.
Um, so I feel like Riz is really funny. Like I'll tease some of my buddies down from Florida because they like can't get any girls, and I'm like, oh, Derek Riz, or Jacob
Right.
Riz, and it's
Right.
like the girls are running away from them. So it's funny. And then I would say I do like Mog a lot. I think mogging is pretty funny.
Dude, I swear, I was just gonna. You read my mind. I was just gonna say that. Mogging, or like frame mogging, is so funny.
Frame
Like,
mogging is great.
yeah, there is a thing, I was like a YouTube short. There's this. I encourage everyone to look up this actor. His name is Alain Delon, Alain, and then Delon. Alain Delon. He is one of like the handsomest actors of all time. He's this like French guy from the '60s, and there's a video of him where it's like Alain Delon's classic walk, and it's just like him walking in a movie. It's stupid. And the top comment is like, when you're that good looking, anything you do is classic or iconic or whatever. And one of the comments was that like Alain Delon, he like frame mogs DiCaprio all the way back to the iceberg in Titanic. It's like, yeah, like mogging is great. I like mogging a
It's
lot.
so good. And I think that one is fun because it kind of comes from like the Gen Z gym culture too.
Yeah.
Which I find funny. Um, so that one's good. Uh yeah, I feel like that's almost all of my Gen Z vocabulary unless something just slips out.
Sure.
Um,
Well, again, yeah, I'm sure more will come to us kind of later.
yep,
But the last thing I wanted to ask you, the final thing, and again, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you again for coming on. The final thing I want to ask you is the
absolutely.
kind of the normal way. The normal way I think most people kind of close out an interview is, do you have any advice? And I will say, if you feel hesitant to give advice, I hear you. Like, I don't like to give advice. I think most people that aren't like like psycho narcissists don't want to like, oh yeah, let me tell you what to do right away. So I'm not asking in kind of in that way, but again, thank God you look at your life and it's like, wishing you all the best. You really do seem to be on this really nice path, and hopefully it just keeps going in that direction. And in a kind of I think, swimming against the current way. When everyone's talking about, oh, everything's so bad with male-female relationships. You have this wife. Oh, no one wants, commitment. You have a daughter. You're a father at a young age, mid-20s. Oh, everyone's just an influencer and they're an entrepreneur. They're just detached. They're an outsider. And you're going into this classic traditional field of medicine that really does help people. What advice would you give again if I'm like I come across the interview? I'm like, man, Zane Pulver is super cool. I wish I could ask him like for advice. So if that person is asking, what would you say to someone just like, what can you tell me to give me some hope?
Hmm. Let's see. Feel like I don't want to give too general of advice because I feel like a lot of the stuff that you hear with like inspirational videos, keep your head down, like just grind it out. I feel like
Yeah.
to a certain extent that is true. Um, it's good to not need to be motivated by external factors to a certain extent, but I would also say that it's really my best advice would be to cultivate the relationships around you with the people specifically who will support you no matter what you're doing, especially if that's a fruitful endeavor. For me, obviously, my wife, like she has supported me so much in my journey of going back to school and trying to get into medical school while we have a new baby. But also my parents, they've given me so much support. My mother-in-law, my father-in-law give me so much support. My sisters. Um, I would say cultivating your family relationships is much more important than any petty disagreement you might have among your family. And I would also say just don't take the ones that you love for granted because you truly do never know how much time you're going to have with them. You never know when your last conversation is going to be. Um, and so I think it's really important just to live every day like it's your last, but also live every day like it could be anyone around you's last. And so I would say, yeah, just cultivate those relationships, and a lot of fruit will come from cultivating the love around you.
That's excellent. That's a perfect, kind of like parting advice. Zane, thank you again very much for coming on. If you don't know the name Zane Pulver, how dare you and shame on you, and you should. Uh, thank you for coming by, and until next time, take care, everyone.
Absolutely. Bye.